Hello and welcome to Heilman and Haver, the Stage and Screen podcast, coming to you from Casa de Quinn and 1111 Studios in beautiful Port Orchard, Washington. I'm Greg Heilman.
And I'm Matt Haver. We're two local actors looking to hone our craft by exploring the best in local theater and on the big screen. Each week we bring you entertainment news and views, celebrate classic Hollywood, enjoy cocktails with a Tinseltown twist, interview talented local actors and directors, and chat with industry experts from LA to the UK.
Welcome to episode 66. Today we're pleased to welcome to the show Kathryn Van Meter, the inaugural recipient of the Heilman and Haver 2021-22 Best Choreography Award for Beauty and the Beast at the Fifth Avenue Theater. A champion of large-scale community theatrical adventures, Kathryn choreographed As You Like It for Seattle Repertory Theater's Public Works program, and directed and choreographed Matilda at Village Theater, where she worked with Star 101.5 to generate the Matilda Movement, a program honoring local youth making a difference in their community.
Kathryn also served as the interim artistic director of Seattle Children's Theater, where she created Ghost Light Stories, a weekly web series of ghost stories designed to help children process fear and anxiety around COVID-19, and produced and directed So Many Heroes, a national song of thanks, with 75 youth from 16 cities across America. Kathryn's work as a teaching artist has taken her around the world, from Iowa to South Africa and Siberia. As an activist artist, Kathryn worked with artists striving to end poverty to develop One World Through Theater, a generative theatrical conversation between students in South Africa, North Carolina, and Washington.
Kathryn was the series choreographer for the Netflix original series 13 Reasons Why and Crater, an upcoming feature for Disney+, and she recently made her debut as intimacy coordinator for the Netflix original series Echoes, which spent 2 weeks at #1 worldwide. In 2016, she worked with the U.S. Department of Labor to develop the national definition for the occupation of choreographer. She's a 5-time nominee and 2-time Gregory Award winner for choreography, and was the 2018 People's Choice winner for directing an outstanding performance as a lead actor.
Kathryn holds a BA in theater and a minor in dance from the College of William & Mary. She served on the National Board of Governors for AGMA, the Seattle Liaison Committee for Actors' Equity, and was the chair of the Seattle Steering Committee for the Society of Directors and Choreographers. She joins us from her home in Seattle.
In Atlanta, Georgia. So I moved from Oakland, California to a suburb of Atlanta between sophomore and junior year of high school. Georgia has this incredible program called the Georgia Governor's Honors Program. And you have the opportunity to either audition or interview on your school, your county, and your state level to spend 6 weeks at a college studying something you could potentially major in college. So I auditioned to go as a theater major, and I got in. And so I spent 6 weeks between my junior and senior year of high school with students from all over the state of Georgia studying theater in this amazing sort of pressure cooker capacity. And one of the things we did was an original devised piece, which was like mind-blowing as a creation process to me. And I fell in love with it. And I came back from that summer and much to my parents' chagrin at the time, said, hey, I think I found the thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And at that point, I'd really loved school and lots of different subjects in school. I was like, maybe going to go to Georgia Tech and be some sort of engineer, or maybe go to a different kind of school and be some sort of lawyer. And then I found theater, and I knew that it was something that I could learn for the rest of my life and like maybe never master, that it would continue to challenge me. And yeah, so then I went to the College of William & Mary, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I have a Bachelor of Arts in Theater. And I think that has a huge factor in the breadth of the kind of career that I've had. That Bachelor of Arts and the sort of liberal arts degree. And by the time I graduated from college, I had directed musicals and choreographed musicals and hung lights and worked backstage and acted in plays and acted in musicals and worked in the box office. And I really was able to sink my teeth into every aspect of theater. And learned that I wanted to be involved in as many different aspects as I could be. So, yeah, that's a flyover.
Well, so it sounds like you got, like you said, a ton of experience organically or deliberately through your college career. Now, as a professional, you've done so many things, as you alluded to. Was the move into the production aspects of theater professionally a more organic thing, or Was it one of those, hey, we need somebody to do this, and you had experience, so you stepped in? Did you spend a significant amount of time as an actor and dancer and then move into production, or was it something that happened right away?
It happened. It happened right away in college because I had such a strong dance background, and I wasn't in a BFA program. Even though I was a freshman in college, Guys and Dolls was the first semester, fall show first semester, and I did that show. And then pretty immediately, there was a student-produced company on stage that was doing a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and they just saw that I was a really great dancer, and they said, "Hey, this is a student-produced thing. Have you ever choreographed a musical? Do you want to?" And I said, "I have never choreographed a musical," and sure. and then I choreographed a musical every year I was in college, and Joseph is, like, as you know, sung through. So the dancing doesn't stop in that.
There's no breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, no pressure, huh?
So it's a big one. It's a big one to start with, but I'd certainly made up dances. I'd made up dances before, but I hadn't necessarily made up dances that had stories attached to them. And then I have always been a leader. So I think that the transition from choreographer into director or director choreographer, that happened mindfully, in that I had to work really hard to make that transition. And I think it was a natural progression from what I was doing in rooms anyway.
Does the experience in dancing just lead you to be able to create dances and routines and things like that? Is it just because you do it so much that it becomes part of your second nature, part of a language that you speak almost?
I think a little bit. And I also think, though, that, like, not every actor could be a director, and not every dancer could be a choreographer. I think you have to have a version of being able to go external and see the whole picture. But certainly with the amount of dance that I did in my life, and the variety of styles of dance that I did in my life. And I remember there was a moment when I don't know. When you're young, you don't really think about the fact that your brain doesn't. I just sort of thought that everybody's brains did the same thing, because no one really told me that other brains were different than my brains. So I didn't realize that other people didn't just make up dances when they heard songs. Like, my brain just sort of makes up. It just generates dance.
Second nature, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. And at some point along the way, I learned that not everyone says that.
Have you ever been choreographing something and realized it's a dance move that you made up, in your bedroom back as that 6-year-old?
I haven't had that precise moment. I did have a moment in college. I saw an Alvin Ailey concert, and oh my gosh, I am blanking on this piece. It is one of their most famous dances, and it begins with an R. And I saw that piece, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. And then I saw it again probably 20 years later, and I was like, that has influenced everything I have ever made. Could be like Reflections? No, Revelations. That's it.
Revelations.
Oh, that was hard. Revelations. But I also think that there are pieces of that style, right? That sort of, again, that like big, bold 80s, athletic, big gestural that I had when I was 6, 7, 12, 13. That is that is definitely still part of my aesthetic today, for sure.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I saw my first official ballet last year, and I promised myself after COVID I would never say no to anything again. And that was one of the things I might have, I'll pass in the past.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, I'm going, and I loved it. And that was the first thing that came to mind was the athleticism. Just staggering athleticism and it was a version of the Nutcracker that our good friend Scott Breitbarth up on Bainbridge at Bainbridge Ballet put on. And he choreographed a portion of as well. And, again, ages from, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to semi-pros, adults. And it was little ones were adorable, of course. But yeah, the athleticism that you don't think about until you're sitting there live. And I'm sure was there a specific sport? It sounds like you were into, you said volleyball and basketball. Was there something that you spent time doing that you think translated the best into a dance career as far as the athletics go?
I don't know that there is a specific kind of athleticism that shifted from team sports into my dancing career, but the team sports and learning to play as a team absolutely translated to my theater career and how I approach creating theater and being a part of theater. 100%. I think that you can see a difference in artists who have some experience as a team versus artists who potentially view theater as a solo sport as opposed to a team sport.
Yeah, that's funny. Our friend Dan Estes, who was also an award winner, multi-award winner for last season, he gave myself, that same speech. We're doing a little play called The Post Show down in Port Orchard, and he got everybody together and said, the greatest thing about this is that it's a team sport where you're not competing against each other. Yep. You're all on the same team, and the audience is also not rooting for you to fail. They're rooting for you to succeed. Everybody wants everybody to succeed, and I hadn't necessarily thought of it that way, and I could tell that it also spoke to a lot of especially the younger folks on our cast, and I just really appreciated that parallel.
Well, there's something that can be achieved about what you can achieve when everyone is pointing at the same thing, and that thing is bigger than themselves.
Yeah, we're all making the same movie, as Sidney Lumet liked to say.
Yep. And we can't do it individually. We have to be together.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of success, you first came to our attention last year with the Fifth Avenue Theater's production of Beauty and the Beast, for which you were the choreographer, which I will say, having seen Beauty and the Beast on Broadway with the original cast, this was the closest to that, and actually in some ways surpassed it as far as a version that I've seen of the show. First of all, was this your first experience with the Fifth Avenue Theater, and how did you get involved with Beauty and the Beast?
It was not my first experience with the Fifth Avenue. When I moved to Seattle, my first season in town happened to be David Armstrong, the previous producing artistic director, his first season in town. And between 2000 and 2004, I actually performed quite a lot in shows there and choreographed a production of Wizard of Oz, I think in 2002. And then a production of the Buddy Holly story in, let's say, 2007. But it had been my first time working there in a while. Bill Berry and I had, sort of beautiful quarterly coffees for the last several years, trying to find is it this project? Is it this project? Trying to find a project for me to get back to the theater in. And Jay Woods, who directed Beauty and the Beast, she and I had a relationship from the last several years of admiring each other's work and sort of seeing things that each other had done and had a working relationship that way. And he hired her to direct Beauty and the Beast, and then they asked me to come on board as choreographer.
Well, one of the challenges for a show like that must be finding something fresh. It's so well known. It's so well loved. The Broadway version, the Disney film version, the original story itself. So how did you go about doing that? What kind of research did you do? And, what's your process for taking a much-loved show like that and making it your own?
I try to find a balance between where research can be helpful and then not ever letting it be harmful. Because I think it can do both things. Certainly with something that feels like a big giant classic, like a Beauty and the Beast. I did a production of Mary Poppins a while ago that was the same sort of, the dance of that is just, it's just classic, right?
It's iconic, right? Yeah.
Iconic. So there's what do I do? How can I find a balance between honoring what has come before, but not being hampered by it, but acknowledging, stylistically, be our guest. There are things it needs to have, right? It needs to have some silverware because it says there's silverware. And it's 9 minutes long. So you have to build and build and build and build and build. And it needs to be big and giant at the end. And so I learned how to build a number that's that way. With Beauty and the Beast, in terms of the film, it being animated is super helpful because there's not a lot you can copy because it's animated. So that's really helpful. But there was also something about, it was the first live thing I made coming out of lockdown.
Hmm.
It was the first live thing I think almost everybody in that room had made. There was a definite mindfulness towards casting a primarily global majority company. So there were a lot of bodies in the room that didn't necessarily look like bodies that had had the opportunity to tell that story in that way before. And we were telling a story, the sort of guiding theme for Jay and for all of us was the transformational power of love. In a time where many of us had been trapped in our own versions of our own castles, and in the wake of the country's racial reckoning post George Floyd, that there was a lot to explore inside the play and inside the movement that had to be new, because as human beings, as Americans, as Pacific Northwesterners, as artists, we were all in a place that we'd never been in before. So to copy anything feels like not honoring the moment and the power that we have as artists.
You told me a story when we were at the awards ceremony and just chatting about the dance break in Gaston when they're in the tavern.
Yes.
And how you morph that into something that's more representative and more modern and kind of reflected the diversity of the cast and things like that. Could you tell that story so that our listeners can hear that? Because I thought that was a great thing you did. It was a wonderful, really unique spin on that dance break that you did.
Thanks. So, again, we had a global majority company and we had a black Gaston. I had a black Gaston and I had a white LeFou. And as I was thinking about Gaston and the song, right, that this whole number, this whole town, as led by LeFou, is trying to help Gaston get his groove back, right? He's having a bad day. He's been rejected by the girl. And at this point, if we can imagine a world where we've never seen Beauty and the Beast, we don't know he's a bad guy. We probably think he's dumb or needs to work on his game, but we certainly don't think he's a villain. He hasn't done anything villainous at this point. So we have this, this sort of, again, it's a number that is long. It needs to build. It starts with LeFou and then you add his cronies and then the whole bar is singing along and trying to help him feel better about himself. John Scott, who played LeFou, is an artist that I've worked with for 20 years, and he is an extraordinary tap dancer. So that was one of the things that I thought about that I had at my disposal in how to create this number was I have this clown, this dancing best friend clown who also is an extraordinary tap dancer, right? Which means he's percussive. And then I thought about the beautiful, incredible, wonderful history of step dance that really started in Black colleges in America and Black fraternities and Black sororities. And I thought, well, we have an opportunity to do something with a Black Gaston and a global majority company that you could never do if you didn't have a Black Gaston. And so what if what is building in the number is building in the number builds to LeFou doing something percussive, and then Gaston being like, no, let me actually show you how it's done. So I had this idea early on, and I pitched it, and, you can't change a note of a Disney orchestration. You can't change anything. And I said, okay, well, what if I do this without changing a note? And so I just had Gaston stop the orchestra. So we just inserted this percussion call and response section inside the middle of it and then at the end he brought the orchestra back in and we're off to the races, and it was, huge and successful. The artist who played Babette, her name is B. Russell, and she had been in, I don't recall which sorority she was in, but she was in a Black sorority in college and had been on step teams. And so she was essentially the associate choreographer for that particular number and created that piece and helped us rehearse it and really get the authenticity of that piece inside the overall number of Gaston.
That must have been wonderful to have her as a resource.
Yes.
In that way. It is.
Absolutely.
Have you run across challenges like that or situations in other shows where you've brought in assistant choreographers who have a specific talent? Maybe it's in, like you said, in a type of dance from somewhere else in the world that you're not quite familiar with yourself. Is that a normal thing for a lead choreographer to do?
I have been blessed enough to be able to do it often, and I would love to be able to do it more often. A couple that come to mind, several years ago, I did a production of Man of La Mancha in Arizona, and we reorchestrated the entire score to be actor-musician driven and all flamenco based. We set it in Spain in the 1960s, and it was all flamenco. So we had a flamenco drummer and guitarist and flamenco dancers. And, many of them were from like Cuba or Spain or barely spoke English or spoke English as a second language, and developing and creating, their absolute sort of pure understanding of flamenco, and like learning how to take that and marry it with understanding of musical theater and musical theater dance and how to drive something forward was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think maybe the most artistically satisfying thing I've ever made.
Well, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. I think the more that we can, one of the beautiful things about musical theater is that it already is taking so many different kinds of elements and putting them together in one thing. And I think the more that we can cross-pollinate cultures, the genre can only continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
You mentioned working in Arizona. Your work has, again, predominantly been in the Seattle area, but also Washington, D.C., all over the world. Your career's taken you literally all over the world to places one wouldn't necessarily expect from musical theater. What have you found? I mean, we love Seattle. We do a lot with local theaters on this side of the water and on the Seattle side. What is it that you found differentiates the Seattle area from maybe some of these other markets? What's special about Seattle? Aside from the fact that it rains all the time and everybody wants to be in the theater.
Yes. It has been an incredible place for me to be able to be a multi-hyphenate artist, to not get pigeonholed into, you dance in the ensemble and that's all you do. I've had the opportunity to sort of walk along the musical theater ladder and to, push myself over and do multiple plays and perform in multiple plays, and to work in big houses and small houses and operas and circuses. And so I think it is a community, if you are vigilant in your pursuit of trying to cross over in different genres, that it will allow you to do that. I think it can be hard to break into things here, but if you have a little bit of staying power, that can serve you well.
Well, it seems like such a great test market, for lack of a better term. So many Broadway-bound shows debut here. We just saw, National Lampoon's Broadway Vacation, which we assume will end up on Broadway. Things like Mrs. Doubtfire, one of the last shows I saw before. Somehow Mrs. Doubtfire always comes up in my conversations. I just love that show so much. Ended up on Broadway, and then, of course, quarantine hit. But and then you get such a wide variety. You do get things like Beauty and the Beast and those big popular things, and then you have these smaller theaters that are bringing a lot of more independent stuff. And it's a great place to be involved, whether on the creative side or just generally as a consumer and kind of commentator like Greg and I.
I agree. One of the things that was so great about coming to your award ceremony was to see just how exhilarating and vibrant everything on that side of the water is. I mean, I didn't know. It's so exciting. It's so exciting. And I hope that there are more cross collaborations in some way, because I think the community in community theater, I think that word has gotten a really bad rap over the last, I don't even know how many decades. And I just think if we are not making theater for our communities, I don't know why we're doing it.
Yeah, it's just a difference in the size of the community, really.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's so many theaters on this side of the water. It's It really is amazing. Having come from the East Coast, I grew up around Philadelphia, and there were a few, here and there. Once you get out of the city, there weren't so many. But here, between where we are in Port Orchard and through Bainbridge Island, there's at least, I'm going to say up to 10, 8 to 10 little theater companies that are just all wonderful. They're doing a variety of things, from these bigger numbers to little independent things to original productions. We've seen a couple of original plays this year that were really, really good. So, yeah, it's amazing. But your work has taken you from not just from the community theater and the theaters, but also to television as well.
Yes.
So we noticed that you were the choreographer on the Netflix hit series 13 Reasons Why for 9 episodes. So tell us
Yes.
about that experience. How did you get involved with that? And then how does choreography for television or another media such as that differ from the stage?
Sure. Well, Brian Yorkie, who is won the Tony and Pulitzer Prize for Next to Normal. I don't know if you know that he started in Seattle. He moved here and he moved to Issaquah when he was in high school and finished high school and did the Kids Stage program for Village Theater in Issaquah, Washington, and was the associate artistic director at Village Theater for a while back in the early 2000s, and has been a friend and collaborator of mine for, gosh, over 20 years now. And he was the showrunner for 13 Reasons Why. So, the first season he was like, there's this big high school dance. Can you come do it? And I said, yeah, sure. And
Twist my arm, right?
twist my arm. And it was a situation. I have been in a lot of situations in my life, particularly as a choreographer, where there's an aspect of the job that I know how to do, but there are things about the container that are unfamiliar to me. So in addition to saying like, yes, I know how to make up dance steps and I'm super comfortable wrangling 300 teenagers at a time. There was a lot about, I hadn't been on a set before. I hadn't, and I hadn't been on a large budget before, but I'm also really comfortable saying what I don't know how to do. So I immediately developed a relationship with the first AD on the project and the production manager on the project, and didn't try to pretend I knew what I didn't know, and let them know that I was going to really prioritize safety and, not go over time. So that meant they wouldn't go over budget. And it was exhilarating. It was really, really fun. There's a lot of the sort of hurry up and wait thing that felt a little slightly familiar to tech, but not, but, on a grander scale than that for sure. But, being able to really control what people look at with the frame of a camera, as opposed to, well, here's this whole stage and hopefully the lighting designer will have the capacity to light the number in the way I had it be in my mind, right? This is like, oh, it's the frame, and you're only looking at the frame, either something in close up or the depth of the frame. So playing with that was really fun. And then I ended up going back every season. 3 out of the 4 seasons had big, giant high school dances in them, and I did all of those. And then there was, I think it was maybe season 2, there was a scene in a punk club. There was a mosh pit in a punk club that I got to make. And then at the end of season 3, there was a really pivotal moment where 2 characters had a fight, a very physical fight, and they entered that fight already with some pretty big physical injuries as characters. And they had me come down and be a movement coach for that piece to shape the fight and make sure that all of the things we knew were wrong with their bodies, that the actors kept them wrong with their bodies as they navigated this big fight. So yeah, so I was able to do a wide variety of coachings. And then they brought me down one time. They were doing a series of shooting big football sequences, and so that one had like 1,000 extras at the football stadium, and they brought me down to just like be a hype person to keep the crowd amped up over the length of the 12-hour day.
And back to your athletic experience, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
We could spend literally an entire show on any one of these aspects of your career, but And we will. We want to get you back on to talk intimacy coordination
Okay.
for sure. But before we wrap, one question I have for you is I continually hear throughout our conversation the people that you know and that you've met and you've ended up working with again, or folks that you have a reputation with. And that's something Greg and I have, it became very, very, it just became very obvious quickly, not only as actors in a smaller community, but also now working with people all over the world, that relationships are the most important thing, and building those relationships, and that it comes back to you, good and bad, based on how you treat people. What advice do you have for folks getting into the business, whether it's theater, television, film, about building those relationships and making sure that they last in a positive way?
I mean, one is you just never know when you're going to see anyone in the room again, and how the power positions will shift over time, right?
Yeah. And that's something we've heard before is, the guy that's parking my car might end up being a director, and he's going to call me sometime because I treated him with respect.
Yeah, and part of that I would say really is about doing some deep work so you understand your own values and your own integrity and how you want to move through the world so that you don't compromise yourself along the way. It's not just like be nice to everyone because they might be able to help you later, because not everyone's going to be nice to you, and you shouldn't also let people walk all over you because you think they might hire you later, right?
Absolutely.
So spending some time understanding where your personal and professional boundaries are as you move through this space, and understanding that you don't have to sacrifice them to move ahead. It feels like you might need to in the moment.
Very well said. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, Kathryn, what is next for you? You said you've got a bunch of things that you're working on now and then moving into 2023. What is next for you, and how can people keep up with what's going on in the world of Kathryn Van Meter?
Yeah, well, I'm teaching an acting class at Cornish College of the Arts currently, which is really fun. I'm teaching the first year acting and original work students an improvising and devising and collaborating class, which is really exciting. And I am directing a production of Cabaret for them this fall, which I'm doing in a smaller theater. I'm doing sort of an immersive version in a small theater, and I'm really excited about it. And then next year, I'm choreographing Sense and Sensibility, the Kate Hamill Sense and Sensibility for Village Theater, and then a 12th night for Seattle Shakes, and then Hello Dolly back out at Village Theater are the sort of three big pieces for next year. So how do people follow me? That's great. I if anyone would like to design my website, I would love to have a conversation with you. My Instagram handle is It's Going Very Well, but I am not awesome about posting things on there. I don't have a great answer to that question.
You're a busy person.
Well, we'll do our best. We'll do our best to get the word out about the stuff that you're working on.
Thanks,
Especially Village Theater is theater. We've talked about this before, wanting to get a little more involved with
Absolutely
knowing what's going on with them and promoting them and getting them on for one of our Get to Know a Theater segments in the future.
Yes, and I that team out there, they have a new artistic director and a new managing director, and so I think that would just be a really great conversation for the four of you to have, for sure.
Well, and I think it sounds like just start checking your programs, people. Look for a choreographer. If you see an amazing show, might be a pretty good chance she's listed.
Well, thank you. There are many beautiful, wonderful, talented choreographers in Seattle. So it is a prolific place. But I will say I think that choreography is not understood well. I think because it is lumped with director and music director, people think that my job is like those jobs, but my job is actually like playwright or composer.
Mm-hmm.
Choreographers generate all of their own steps. There's no book. We don't go find them somewhere and just teach them. I mean, unless you're doing a Jerome Robbins show, and then there's a Bible, and it's called a Bible, and that's a different story. But when you see something that is choreographed in a musical, every single one of those steps came out of the mind of the choreographer for that particular production. And that, it is a beautiful, generative, creative. There is something where there was nothing before art form. And I think that is overlooked often when people think about what a choreographer actually does.
Well, not on our watch.
Thanks, y'all.
Well, Kathryn, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We're looking forward to seeing the next thing that you're working on and involved in, and hopefully maybe get you over to this side and hang out again and take you to one of the shows over here. And again, thank you so much for making the time.
You are most welcome. And that would be great. I would love to come back over to that side for sure.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And to get a little more involved with
Absolutely
knowing what's going on with them and promoting them and getting them on for one of our Get to Know a Theater segments in the future.
Yes, and that team out there, they have a new artistic director and a new managing director, and so I think that would just be a really great conversation for the four of you to have for sure.
Well, and I think it sounds like just start checking your programs, people. Look for a choreographer. If you see an amazing show, might be a pretty good chance she's listed.
Well, thank you. There are many, many beautiful, wonderful, talented choreographers in Seattle. So it is a prolific place. But I will say I think that choreography is not understood well. I think because it is lumped with director and music director, people think that my job is like those jobs, but my job is actually like playwright or composer.
Mm-hmm.
Choreographers generate all of their own steps. There's no book. We don't go find them somewhere and just teach them. I mean, unless you're doing a Jerome Robbins show, and then there's a Bible, and it's called a Bible, and that's a different story. But when you see something that is choreographed in a musical, every single one of those steps came out of the mind of the choreographer for that particular production. And that, it is a beautiful, generative, creative. There is something where there was nothing before art form. And I think that is overlooked often when people think about what a choreographer actually does.
Well, not on our watch.
Thanks, y'all.
Well, Kathryn, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We're looking forward to seeing the next thing that you're working on and involved in, and hopefully maybe get you over to this side and hang out again and take you to one of the shows over here. And again, thank you so much for making the time.
You are most welcome. And that would be great. I would love to come back over to that side for sure.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to our guest, Kathryn Van Meter. Keep up with her on Instagram, linked in the show notes, and follow our coverage of Seattle theater for news on her upcoming projects.
And if you enjoyed episode 66, please make sure to follow us and share the podcast with a friend or two. You can find all the latest at heilmanandhaver.com, along with all our past episodes, stage reviews, and popular segments like Get to Know a Theater and In the Mix, and behind-the-scene artist interviews. As always, thank you for supporting your local theater and for joining us on Heilman and Haver.